Newcastle Herstory, everyone. I'm Louise Young. I'm going to be your host for this evening. It's if you don't know about me, where you be? Not kidding. No, I'm not known. I'm just a lowly stand-up comedian. I don't really like doing a whole full-on CV situation. It feels boastful, but I've done many great things. I haven't really. But I know it's arrogant to think that you would know who I am. I've done some. I'm on the stand-up comedy circuit regularly. I've I had a little show on BBC Newcastle. I've done some sketches with Channel 4. I'm currently on tour with Alan Carr, and I've done different tour supports, so it feels awful doing that. But there, I'm not making it up if I tell you who I am. So, this is, I'll be your host for tonight. I do feel as though I feel a kinship with this project because I definitely, in my comedy itself, it's very autobiographical, so I talk about being a woman from Tyneside. So it is nice to be here and sort of be filled with those stories as well. It's lovely. And I don't know, I kind of feel like I've done a few things for this project now, and every single time that I do, I genuinely walk away feeling very sort of inspired, and my eyes are opened a little bit more to things that are happening like on my doorstep, because I am from Tyneside. Obviously, this accent's not put on for sure. So I am genuinely thrilled to be a part of it. And it's like I was saying before as well, the stories that you hear and the perspectives are genuinely inspirational, and the talent is abundant. So it's wonderful. And I do feel, being on the comedy circuit all the time, I just spend my life in green rooms with loads of men. So it's a very male-dominated industry, so it is nice for me just to have an evening at work that's just loads of women. It's wonderful. So this event is presented by Poet in the City. So that's Poet in the City is a producer of poetry shows, community commissions, talent development, and they sort of take stories and turn them into adventurous poetry productions. And so Poet in the City is in partnership with Newcastle Libraries and the British Library. And this programme is part of the finale for Herstory, a storytelling series built over the last 2.5 years. And that dives into feminist histories to consider new pathways for change and action in the gender equality movement. Herstory brings together contributions from over 400 women and 60 artists. Wow, I got impressed there. And collaborators to celebrate the feminist scene across generations. So we're producing installations to reach women right across the city. Having run creative consultations across the programme, we know that unless this conversation includes those who are most vulnerable and marginalised, we're not doing a very good job at feminism. So this finale isn't, we really hope, just one moment to celebrate, but coming together of a lot of detailed work and community partnerships to ensure many people can be involved in contributing to Herstory. So for Newcastle, Poet in the City has been utterly blown away by you. I felt like saying by us there because I sort of want to take some of the credit, but I did not write any of the poems. From our 3 lead poets, we have Ellen Moran, Degna Stone and Skye Hawkins, to all of the community groups, writing groups, theatre companies and bands who responded to our call out, and the local young producers who've worked tirelessly to make content for this programme. You are incredible, and feminism in this city is strong, rooted, diverse, and thriving. Yeah, it is. And so I concur. Herstory is locally rooted in Newcastle and also a national conversation. Our lead poets took inspiration from the British Library's Unfinished Business exhibition, which focuses on the fight for women's rights, from bodily autonomy and the right to education to self-expression and protest. And this exhibition explores how feminist activism in the UK has its roots in the complex history of women's rights. So our poets worked across the city with individuals and community groups capturing stories and voices to inform new collections of poetry and new productions. This work provided a starting point for the Herstory Festival. So the programme will feature talks and performances from activists, musicians, theatre makers and poets, all of whom have created new work just for Herstory. We can't wait to share these amazing stories with you.
So, yes, my name is Lenny, and I'm really pleased to be here today with Ellen. One of the things I just realized, too, is our names they're all both mean light. Lenny, Lenore, and Ellen. It all comes from Helen, and we are light.
And a nice assonance as well, which is fitting.
Yeah. So you have come to this place because Poet in the City commissioned 3 poets, as we've already heard tonight, 3 poets to write poems on this subject and to explore feminism. And they did it really in an interesting way through workshops and collaboration with communities. And there were 3 poets. One of them was Degna Stone, the other was Skye Hawkins, and the third is Ellen, who's here today, and the other 2 can't make it, sadly. But their work has been central to the project, too, and I just want to tell you a tiny bit about the other 2 poets. Skye Hawkins, her poetry considered women's bodies, and it was inspired by the archive of Spare Rib and Newcastle's Slovak community. And Degna Stone, her work was inspired by the artists of colour in the unfinished business. That was the exhibition at the British Library. And she worked with the Children's Society in Newcastle Treatment, Recovery, and the Fenham Walking for Health. Ellen, who's here tonight, is poet, spoken word artist, and your work for this project was inspired by themes of protest. And you worked with the Tyneside Women's Health in Biker, where your ancestors are from. So tell me a little bit more about where the poems actually come from. So, because it's not verbatim, isn't it? You're not doing, how some people do that kind of theatre, don't they, where they listen to somebody's activities or experiences and then translate it into a play or a poem even. But you've not done that, have you?
No, that poem is the closest that I came to that. And it's really hard to explain how you sort of sift through people's experiences, find meaning in it from your own life, and then turn it into a piece of art. It's quite an intuitive process, quite a magical process that actually I think involves connection to society. It requires looking deep into someone's eyes and being honest with them, and then having that returned, and then using that honesty to produce heartfelt truths through art. That's a long and rambling way of saying I don't really know how it works. But isn't that good that we don't know how it works, because it's unique and interesting, and it's about connection.
And what so you read the poems back to the women?
Yes.
And what was that like?
Wow, that was one of the greatest moments of my life, honestly. So because I was there January 2019, the amount that had changed since those poems were written was incredible. We were all, rather than sitting around a table, we were all at our own individual desks with glass in between us. And those women were still accessing that project, so essential that they were still accessing that project, despite all of the changes in the world and in their lives. And knowing that project was still there and still going was just so important, because domestic violence and domestic abuse has just increased drastically because of COVID. It's just gone crazy. So I was really pleased that I could go back there and speak to them. And they just got it. They were so honoured to hear their words rhyme. I think there's something really nice about hearing something rhyme that you believe. As simple as that, really. And I don't write a lot of rhyming poetry anymore, but I think that actually rhyme is really connecting people in society. There's something ancestral about that. It's like a dance with words.
It's like music, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And why did you take this on when Poet in the City came to you and said, would you go into did you get to choose the community you went into?
I worked with a community liaison person to find the group, and it just kind of all fell into place after that.
And so why did you say yes?
Because...
Was she forced?
Because was so new to writing, and I had only ever really written for myself. I think with slam poetry, like, you write about these really big issues, and that's like what the ultimate slam poem has got. You know, everyone's crying, everyone's laughing, everyone's angry, everyone's moved in so many different ways. But it's always like, it's like in this kind of little bubble. And I kind of wanted to break out that bubble and write with and for other people rather than just me.
And one of the things you said when we were talking beforehand, we were talking about poetry and we were talking about feminism, and you had this lovely line, which is that feminism is a language.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a bit more? Think about that again.
Think about the nature of language, always changing. People have to trace things back to really understand where it came from. People speak in different dialects. Not everyone understands each other. People use words that other people don't understand. Everyone's different. Sometimes we need translation. And I think that within feminism, that translation tool is understanding and respect. Respect that not everyone agrees with you. And I think we move and morph with language, and language shapes us. And I think feminism is like a bigger entity. It's like almost like an external thing sometimes that shapes people as well, especially online. So yeah, I think it's a good metaphor.
Yeah, talk a bit more about that, about the metaphor. Because it can be a metaphor for dissent. It can be, it can also be a way of connecting. I'm interested in how you are shaping the language, both with the idea of the women's voices that you want to portray, but also you have an idea yourself, don't you?
Yeah, and it's like a kind of mutual morphic relationship that kind of you're moving and you're changing, and I'm influenced by the women who are talking to me about these ideas, and then I'm performing to them, and then I'm giving them a sense of myself. I'm giving them a piece of myself. I'm like sacrificing a piece of myself for them, and they're doing the same back for me in the poetry. Like, I think the final piece in my commission, I go into quite a deep place about my family, my history, and where I came from as a person, and I use a metaphor that they handed to me in one of those sessions, and it's about weaving and sewing and mending, repairing, and yeah.
We're going to hear that, but not just yet. Not just yet. But I wanted you to say again a little bit more about where you had come from. So, because you said where you were working was actually from where your ancestors were.
Some of them, yeah, some of them.
So that must have felt a very good thing to connect again to.
Yep. Again, and there's that kind of magical ancestral thing that can't be put into words, where sometimes you find yourself in the right place in life because you are. If you honor where you've come from, you find yourself in the right place. And I actually, lived in the East End of Newcastle and spent a lot of time thinking about what it was like for the women in my family who lived there previously, who did a lot of unpaid labor, who were probably working as hard as the men, but often just not paid at all, actually, in quite really difficult conditions in large Catholic families that didn't have heating or adequate food, and that, like, I spent a lot of time thinking about that and how lucky, how privileged I am, but really walking those streets. And finding all the little bits of the East End where the cobbles are sort of poking out on the road, and kind of just thinking, like, what must it have been like for them? Yeah.
And so poetry picks up, it obviously, it literally picks up from the cobblestones, isn't it? And from the blood and the sweat. But also, so it's a place of memory, isn't it? You're doing both things, memorializing, I suppose, in one way, but also giving new possibilities.
Yeah, it's like a circle, though, isn't it? It's a loop. It's a thread tied.
And do you think I'm very interested in the kind of poetry that you draw from something like going into a community group, which would you call that sort of poetry of testimony, of experience or something? I mean, do you think there's a sort of hierarchy of poetry?
No.
I knew you were going to say that.
Of course
Why?
not.
Okay, defend your position.
Well, it's like saying there's a hierarchy of language or, I mean, really taste, and it's like class. And I'm not down with it. If you like what you like, I don't care. Enjoy words in as many different guises as you possibly can. Like the same with film and TV. It's like whatever you like.
No, I'm agreeing with you there.
Yeah.
And this started with the unfinished business, didn't it, at the British Library? And so you went to the British Library, and what did you see? what meant things to you?
Well, what I loved about it was the texture of it, the material of it. I felt like, because I saw some objects in early 2020, late 2019. Can't remember. And then, like a million years ago, isn't it, that time?
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw it after, like in that kind of summer period where we were allowed outside. And I think a lot of people have had this experience. It's like the pandemic was really heady, and words are very heady. Mm-hmm. We're like up here, we're thinking, they're like, yeah. And the exhibition was good because it was really down to earth. There was a lot of physical objects, books, paper, banners, posters, and that just meaty material. I was like, no, I need to do that. And so that's why I've created what I've created with my work, because I wanted it to be like an earthly experience.
And you're also working on something called the Protest Library. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so Protest Library features a lot of Penny's incredible posters, other objects as well. And what I've tried to do is use the material culture of protest as trigger points for the poetry to explore different ideas about protest. And I've had some incredible donations to the Protest Library, and I've curated them in a promenade space, and I will take people through that promenade space and talk and perform poetry as I go. Starting the process of writing these poems, I worked with Tyneside Women's Health to think about what the rules were that women had to obey every day, whether that be consciously or unconsciously. And then we started to think about what the demands would be if we were going to have our own protest. And the reason we did that is because you can't protest unless you know what you want to change. There's just no point. It's just screaming into the void. So one of the things that we did was we did some collage posters, and these posters are artistic representations of what the women felt about the workshops and what they want to change. And we also had some really frank discussions about what's expected of us, and a lot of that was around the domestic sphere, family life, and the sort of power relations in the family and in society. And it was really striking to me going into that as an activist, an active activist as a community organizer, to see the gentleness and the softness and the minuteness of those protests. So I've reflected those conversations in a spoken word piece that I'd like to perform for you as my first poem. Sometimes it's enough just to break a man's silence, to exist listening in his world for so long that just whispering is your defiance. Sometimes it's enough to say no, to say excuse me to unwanted intrusions, refuse a hug or ask someone to go. Sometimes it's enough not to go to confession, stop speaking your sins and start asking your own questions. Sometimes it's enough to join the congregation, to worship and be faithful, to be patient, grateful, and graceful. Sometimes it's enough to ask for what you're owed, stop carrying someone else's load, shed your burdens and stay composed. Sometimes it's enough to pipe up, to interrupt, to defy expectations and be abrupt. Sometimes it's enough to demand to be heard, to command, to assert, to speak regardless of hurt. Sometimes it's enough to discuss splitting up, stop committing, back off, plaster yourself up. Sometimes it's enough not to smile or give your number, to cross the street, to repeat, I don't have a boyfriend, I'm just not interested in every single man I meet. Sometimes it's enough just to mention the cleaning, stop feeding and sweeping, start believing it's okay to leave your dishes after eating. Sometimes it's enough to fall in love, to circumvent arrangements others made for you and be your own judge. Sometimes it's enough to ask for respect, stop trying to impress, make requests, be denied, feel depressed. Sometimes it's enough to back up a mate. Sometimes it's enough to stay out late. Sometimes it's enough to walk away. There's all these tiny rules women are breaking every day. All these lasses sitting telling each other, actually, it's okay. But all this male aggression mounting up and getting in the way, and all these women getting worried and hiding themselves away. It can feel like it's never enough. It can start to test your patience. It can get relentless. It can end up in frustration. So when you lie in bed and you think of all the things you did and said, know that one day it will be enough for our liberation. When we think about protests, quite often we'll look to the past. We think about people who came before us. We think about civil rights movements, movements for equality, and even revolutions. And that's because without those things, we simply wouldn't enjoy the freedom and luxuries that we have today. I'm not saying everything's perfect, but it's a lot better than it was, and that's because of protest. The effects of protest are deeply ingrained in our whole society and our personalities, really. And protest can be done in a multitude of ways. Some people form small groups, a single issue, and they go and try and change that. Others take a broader view, hoping that change will come on a larger level and that they can change massive things about society with their action. And nowadays it's known as intersectionality, but it's actually quite old. It's impossible to ignore the suffragettes when we think about women's protests specifically. And my intersectional feminist hero is Sylvia Pankhist. She's a suffragette who never gave up agitating, educating, and organising everyone, I mean everyone, in her work. And I was moved to write this poem after discussing the suffragettes with the women at Tyneside Women's Health, but also after seeing a photo of Sylvia Pankhist agitating on a piece of scaffolding in London. Sylvia on scaffolding. Sylvia on scaffolding speaks to me from her parapet of the people, of strength in numbers, a backbone of power where all hope would look lost. Sylvia on scaffolding speaks to me from her lectern of agitation, of the abuse that comes from capital, a platform to protest where workers are ground down. Sylvia on scaffolding speaks to me from her wooden crafted frame, of the many hands of women, a multitude of digits ready to rebuild the world. Sylvia didn't always have a good time. She sacrificed herself for us again and again. She was force-fed, imprisoned, and abused. As she watched poor women of colour, Jewish women, and Irish women be subjected to even worse than her as a privileged white English woman, she continued to fight for all of their rights as best as she could. Unlike her sister Chrisabel and her mother Emmeline, who disowned her for supporting the Irish, specifically, but also Black, Brown, and Jewish women in London, she wanted equality for all. And in prison, she wrote her own poetry on thick, scratchy toilet paper. And in this poetry, she imagined herself as a bird. She longed for freedom, for everyone. And this is the problem with protest. It grinds you down, and sometimes it locks you up. There's always a consequence to protest, whether it be as severe as the abuse Sylvia Pankhist suffered, or the more subtle, overhanging disillusionment that comes with losing, seeing your rights eroded, seeing vulnerable people get squashed again and again. Sometimes we see ourselves getting trapped in structures which further imprison us. For example, abuse within leftist organizations, voting for someone who doesn't get in, someone getting in who you didn't vote for. Infighting between feminists, black women getting ignored, trans women being denied their rights or their very existence or their ability to talk, disabled people having to speak louder and louder, LGBTQIA+ people pushed aside, and more.
So I think that's a good time to go to our last poem to finish. And it very much comes out of what you're talking about, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's called Fabric Hands. Ellen Wilkinson must have had fabric hands. Thread, fingertips, pincushion palms, and wrists releasing silk banners scrawled with demands. With each word, she wove workmen's minds, embroidered closed-down shipyards, blanketed the workhouse without walls, wrapped, malnourished in patchworked cotton. Women and war kept the yards open. Shipbuilders' uniforms split, frayed edges of thick melting wool screeched when caught on scraps of steel. So it was lucky that my grandma too had fabric hands. Felted tough fabrics to withstand North Sea spray, repaired donkey jackets with nimble loops, used pianists' fingers to knit hats and scarves, peeled patterns from magazines to adorn children in 1960s lace trims. When I fell and broke my skin, my mother buttoned it back up. Her hand cream softness silked over exposed tissue, caressed my baby cheeks as I reached for the cared-for cuticles on her fabric hands. My tiny digits grasped at hers. She unthimbled me, showed me the supple potential of loose strands. Fingers like cords clutching spoons and pens fluttered at home and at work, decorating and designing templates to help my hands become more elastic. She handed me a thread that I followed down to the river. I found women there, holding each other up with their fabric hands, mending broken bones and brains with pinpoint accuracy, meshing together stories and problems by binding with zigzag lines their love and anger, knotting chunks of nylon fear and mohair hope to entwine tightly a net of women's work. I'll plait myself inside it, anchor myself in with a piece of string, let my ribboned hair merge with the wind, and when I walk, I'll be pulled by crocheted waves made by women before me. I'll fold into them, because I wear a dress made of fabric hands.
Good evening, esteemed guests. I am Radikal Queen, and as you may have guessed, I am in love with Africa and its entire diaspora, so I speak our truth to music, see? Now, first, as was fitting, you saw me saluting the directions. And now, I pour libations to give thanks and praise and raise my incomparable ancestors like Nina Simone and Mama Maya Angelou These creative masters, these creative mamas gave me license and life. And let me take this moment to honor the recent passing of my hero, Betty Davis, whose funky, brilliant bawdiness set a precedent for my own outrageous forms of self-expression. See, I said I'm Afidizambangwe Atangno Mongolo, meaning confidence in life, in love, and what many of us call God. I am here to present to you Jazz Witch. Jazz Witch is a being outside of time, outside any of our minds, made from the breath and genius of countless black women and mages, many of whom has been forgotten throughout the ages. So let me first speak to you of Ma Rainey, yeah? Ma Rainey was known as the mother of the blues. That's right. Ma Rainey refused to choose to compromise. She was the jazz pioneer, and she lived a life of queer black liberation. Born as Gertrude Pidgeot, you know, one of her fellow musicians said that after you perform with Ma Rainey, there is nowhere else to go but back to the Lord. Hell yeah, amen. And then Bessie Smith, who built on her relationship with Ma Rainey to make a name for herself as the Empress of Blues. You know, we also have Ella Fitzgerald, the First Lady of Song, Billie Holiday, Lady Day, the inimitable Mamie Smith and Sarah Vaughan, and of course, Josephine Baker, whose face and form and likeness is emblazoned in modern Western history. There's a few reasons why. But let us not forget Catherine Dunham, who is largely unrecognized for creating modern American ballet out of the fluidity and originality of black jazz culture and dance. Black jazz culture and dance. I want to give you a piece which is about romance with consent. And it starts, ooh, take me home. Baby, please now, take me home. I wanna feel your body tight, right in my, baby, please take me home. I wanna hear you call out my name again and again. Oh, we can do it again now. See, when you slide right deep inside, you know, we're gonna feel the stars light up the night. Oh, oh. See, baby, that's right. Now, baby, please take me back. No, please, now. Let's go back, back, back. I want to see a sweet beauty, a deep dark body moving next to mine. Lover, please, let's go back. Matter of fact, what is taking so long? Could motherfucking taxi cab. Oh, don't you know I said I don't wait until the coming of the light before I say that this is what I want. Oh, and that I want it tonight. Now take it slow. Come on, baby. We need to go slow. You know why? I told you so. I said, you know we've a long way to go now, baby. But to fulfill me. Just say that you'll surrender to the heat, the beat of my heart, Don't you know I said I won't wait until the coming of the light before I say that this is what I want. Oh, and that I want it tonight. Now, baby, do I have your express permission to rip your clothes off right now in the car? I think we should have this discussion because home is kind of far. Now, baby, tell me, is it my full soft? So baby, it's these deep noises that take you all the way to the brink and make you think you're gonna die if you don't get some of that feel good, alright. Some of that good tonight. Take me home, baby, please. Oh yeah, we need to go home. 'Cause when you supply right down inside, we gon' feel the stars, know the stars, see the stars, light up the dot. Baby, that's right, yeah. Oh, see, I say that making love is like making revolution, because it brings you to the truth beyond your illusions. I say that making love is like making revolution, because they both bring you to the truth beyond your illusions. Now this of all the lovers out there, later on tonight, drive right and take care. And remember to always practice safe sex. That is with your partner's full and enthusiastic consent. Yeah? Oh, you heard me right. So you better make sure that you act right. And then maybe if you're lucky, later on tonight, you might have a honey who just might give you just a little ride. But remember, anyone can break any promises of future ass.
Hello, my name is Lindsay and I am a theatre maker and facilitator here in Newcastle. I'm running a workshop today that is called Find Your Forgotten Pirate, and it's basically me trying to encourage people to embrace a bit of piracy into their feminism. So I'll be telling them a little bit about the golden age of pirates, and in particular one rebel female pirate who I'm hoping we can all draw a bit of inspiration from to cause some good trouble and disrupt the patriarchy. I'm going with piracy. It spoke to me because I feel like we're kind of losing the fight and the argument, the narrative around, in particular, gender-based violence and gender inequality. I feel like there's a lot of energy spent arguing with people, which kind of deplatforms the conversation ultimately. So rather than pushing back against the patriarchal narrative, I'm saying let's curve, let's take it somewhere else. Let's reframe this narrative about people who are harmed by patriarchy, and let's start from a place of strength rather than having to push back when we're kind of being victimized or hurt or oppressed by it. Let's start somewhere powerful and strong. In my workshop today, we are going to really try and evoke our imaginations. That is the first tool for us to start to see change. What does the future look like? Can we imagine it? And how can we use our creativity to break some rules if we have to, or to cause some good trouble to get there? So with that, we will look at some things that we can take from pirates of the Golden Age, how they've actually influenced democracy as we know it today, and in particular, one female dissident rebel pirate who went against the status quo and found liberty under the Jolly Roger. And that's going to be our provocation, our little ignition today to get us thinking about how we can keep striving towards liberty or freedoms and equality for everyone. I wanted to be involved in Herstory, and it's lovely to be invited to be part of some amazing, inspirational people and artists. But for me, it was really the provocation that they sort of ran this year's festival with, which was, what does a city look like that cares for its women? And that started making me think about people who are sort of caretakers, guardians, real warriors, looking after everyone who does get harmed by violence or patriarchy or gender-based violence. I'm a theatre maker myself, so in using creative ways to explore and unpick issues, that's kind of how I work. So it's really good to be here, especially within Newcastle City Library and a wealth of literature and art, which ultimately helps form us and give us freedom and tools anyway. So it always like a nice meeting of minds for me to kind of play around with this idea of piracy that was starting to take shape inside my head. I think piracy fits really well with this city and this festival, because in Newcastle we are obviously known for our resilience and remaining robust, especially in terms of culture, because we are one of the most deprived and underfunded parts, of the UK, well, in England here in the north. And with that lack of, funding, lack of opportunities, lack of care, lack of investment, we always have to kind of create and find our own DIY ways of doing things. So we've always still had like a thriving live music scene, art scene, artists. And that's something that doesn't go, but we have to always kind of go against the status quo and write our own rules. So that's why I think piracy, what I'm playing with, really ties into that and just fits nicely into this city, or shall I say that I'm influenced by this city and its people. Care with courage, it's knowing when to be gentle and when to be fierce. So being gentle with people, their hearts, their souls, their minds, or bodies, but being fierce in protecting them, and in your campaigning and your striving for equal rights for everyone. I have a friend who puts it love and rage, like love hard, but it's okay to be angry. And it's kind of knowing when to do that, when to kind of have the fire. So whether the fire is a gentle love and a care for people, or whether the fire is the kind of activism, the tools that you need, and when you do know that you need to apply that more angry side of your fire to get things done, but you're doing it for the right reasons, which ultimately is to just that human level of like human rights for everyone, equality and equity for everyone.
About Ma Rainey, and her mentee, Bessie Smith. I heard that Bessie Smith died, bled to death on the road in a car accident because the doctor was too busy treating the superficial cuts and scratches of a nearby white couple. There's another story that she actually survived in the ambulance, but not for long, because the ambulance driver had to find a hospital that was willing to treat black patients. Can you imagine? Can you imagine what it was like to live that kind of life? When I think that my predecessors created these syncopated beats, beloved in all the respectable houses, and yet, since Bessie Smith or Ma Rainey were seen as sexual deviants or bad black women, they didn't have the right. There were jazz witches like one in Minneapolis who sheltered black musicians and artists, gave them a space to be safe. So, I will pour a drink for real allies. You know, I was just thinking the other day about the sexual freedom of black women in majors. Dig it. Do I please you? Eh? Do I tease you? Do I please you? Do my full lips and deep voices tease you? That's fine, but while you are aching so deep inside, you feel that stake betwixt your thighs. Remember that this, everything you see here, all of this is all of mine. Now if you choose to lose your cool when you watch my sibling move, when you see my sister smile, all the while, now don't forget what she meant when she said all of this is all of mine. Now don't you forget what we meant when we said all of this is all of mine. And when we go, do I please you? Eh? Do I tease you? Do I please you? Do my full soft lips and eat more sips tease you? Do I please you? Eh? Do I tease you? You see, certain men they look, and others try to reach and squeeze the fruit without permission, calling us bitches. No. And with this abuse, they pollute and confuse their passions, telling girls that it's our fashions that make them violate, when they could easily. Let me think, wait. Oh, now motherfuckers couldn't masturbate, yeah? I said what I said, and I heard his tongue was playing footsie with his shoes. Baby boy, that's ridiculous. You see, our sisters, mothers, girlfriends and wives should move amongst us with immunity, never fearing that violation would ever be routine. Reward for what they say is titillation. So make I tell you the truth, it's rape culture's excuse for abominable sexual abuse now. I heard that Brother Adam was wise to wait, according to myth and ancient legend. I heard he was wise to wait until Sister Eve supposedly said, she said, sink your teeth into this saucy fruit. She said, sink your teeth into this fruit. And then she went on, do I please you? Hey, do I tease you? It's why I say, baby, do I please you? Do I tease you? Now the next girl said, she said, do I please you? Do I tease you? Hey. Now we all say, baby, oh, this is mine, sugar. Oh, this is mine, baby. Hey, 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 everybody, good night. Oh.
You know, we had posters all over our houses. Wherever we lived, we'd get a poster and stick it up on the wall. But where I was concerned, rather than just taking them down when they got tatty, I kept them. And I kept them for years and years and years and years. And then I just rediscovered them. Not so very long ago, really, all rolled up under my bed. And so I started unraveling them. And I discovered that I've got some really nice posters. So we're going to see some of those posters this evening. But just to give you a bit of background to me, when I was a young woman, I travelled quite a lot. I signed up for a couple of volunteer programs. So I spent 18 months in the Caribbean, in Trinidad and Tobago. And then, after that, I went to Southern Africa, to Botswana. Both those countries were newly independent at the time. So I was very aware of the whole idea of freedom from colonialism, and the whole notion of liberation was very powerful. But after that, I then went to, I decided I had a degree in sociology, which is why I was working in community development in these two countries. Sort of working, not really. But anyway, community development was my thing. And so I signed up for a postgraduate degree at Mcgill in Montreal. And that's where I really began to kind of put my thoughts into some kind of political order and started collecting posters. So, for me, for a previous generation, I think the images coming from the Russian Revolution were really powerful. I'm talking, you know, if you think about those powerful images of workers in particular, not necessarily particularly of women, but in the Cultural Revolution of China, women had a very important role. And actually, living in North America at the time, the Cultural Revolution was in the 1960s, but it was going on. And in North America, China was of great interest. And actually at Mcgill, there was a fellow called William Hinton who wrote a book called Fan Shen, which is still, I think, an absolute classic. It's about he spent some time in China in a small town, small village, when the revolutionary forces came through. And the book is about how the women there in the village overthrew the landlords, the male landlords, and also pointed out the violent husbands and banished them as well. Very inspiring story. And part of that whole kind of idea was that, as that poster says, women's liberation, women in the process of liberating their country, whether it's from colonialism or imperialism or whatever, could also liberate themselves. Next slide, please. So here's one from Vietnam, was about Vietnam, because of course, the early 1970s, late 60s, early 70s, Vietnam War was really big. That was probably the first poster I got, and if you look at it closely, you'll see it's very tatty. It spent a lot of time on walls with blue tack. The thing about the revolutionary struggles was that certainly a lot of the posters and a lot of the storytelling about it, there's a lot of poetry involved as well. So here's a poem that went with that poster, Ho Chi Minh. The wheel of law turns without pause. After the rain, good weather. In the blink of an eye, the universe throws off its muddy clothes. For 10,000 miles, the landscape spreads out like a beautiful brocade, light breezes, smiling flowers. High in the trees, amongst the sparkling leaves, all the birds sing at once. Men and animals rise up reborn. What could be more natural? After sorrow comes joy. You know, the idea that, yes, there's a struggle to be had, but after that, you know, we have a new world we can all live in and be happy. Next, okay. So we're talking about the 1970s now, and there were anti-colonial and anti-imperial struggles going on all around the world. Vietnam wasn't the only one. And there was a real optimism to these, well, certainly from our perspective in the West, the liberation struggles. I should have said, in terms of the Vietnam War, that poster, I'd spent a summer in California, and it would have been 1969. And at that time, there was so much optimism around about. I remember there was a saying, or it might have been a poster, which said something like, "Imagine if they called a war and nobody turned up." And I remember that because there was this whole feeling that we, the people, can stop this. You know, we are powerful enough to be able to stop this and create a new world which is better. And that kind of optimism was, you know, we saw that within the liberation struggles as well. So ZANU would have been, I'm not sure whether it was Zambia, African National Union, or Zimbabwe, African National Union. But anyway, it says, "No one cracked through our wall of forests or through our fortress of wills, joined as one." The nation, that's how you got, you know, women and men joining together to fight the oppressors. And Frelimo was a freedom movement in Mozambique, which of course was colonized by Portugal.
It's about hard times and hard life. See, I believe in revolution, yeah. And if you disagree, I believe you should be beaten. No, that's no contradiction. If you think peace can come without bloody revolution, where would we be? Where would we be if the people of Haiti hadn't overthrown Napoleon's army in bloody revolution? People like me were seen as property. Is the fact that chattel slavery used to be perfectly legal going to be erased from the conversation around human freedom? Oh. See, I call this piece Colonial Lies. A play on words, if you like. If you look upon life with colonial eyes, you can't help but spit out colonial lies, yeah? So many of us are living in socioeconomic deprivation, and it's a lot more than 3%. I am speaking the truth. I am speaking the truth. Hey! Whoa, yo, yo, yo. No house, no money, no car, no man. Oh. No house, no money, no car, no man. No house, no money, no car, no man. I said no house, no money, no car, no man. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No house, no money, no car, not even a man. This is the shit I know we all can understand. Don't try and front, baby boy. Hey, I did see you. And as for you, baby girl, how your son been there? No house, no money, no car, no man. This is a situation most of us have had. If you need proof of this, open your newspapers, and what you read will scream how much life seems unfair for the best of us. Yeah, what you read will scream how much life is unfair for the best of us, for the rest of us. Hey, yeah. Now, you read most of us will die trying not to live some pale half-life. Why? Trying not to live some pale half-life. Why? Hey. You see that last line? That was the crux of this. And knowing what I know, I feel I have to spit the truth of this now. Spit the truth of this now. They keep on trying, you know they're trying. You cannot blame the youth today, and still they're trying. Oh, and still they're trying. They keep on trying. You cannot blame the youth today, as they're all trying. Even though the communities that they come from keep on dying. Even though the communities that they come from keep on dying. Globalization, gentrification, social isolation, oh, desertification, ecocide, genocide, we're not lying. Say, knowing what I know, I said I have to spit the truth of this now, whoa, yo, yo. I tell you the truth, do I look all that scared? See, when I can't stand, the system took her voice away. Yeah, now. When I can't stand, the system took her voice away. Yeah. No money, no. You know, we have to save ourselves, because this bullshit is a pure invention. You know what the solution might be inside your grandmother's favorite lesson, or it might be shining a light inside your first child's or your last child's very best question. No house, no money, no car, no man. This is a situation most of us have had. Now maybe this doesn't apply to all of us. After all, we are bougie Westerners. But for the rest of us, don't be frightened like you never crumbled crisps on toast, like you never emptied out your butts on one last smoke, like you never had to fiend because you were all out of weed. And that fine ass man you picked up, he had nothing but seeds. One more. He had nothing but seeds down. Thank you.